Folks, if you can hear me, would you please grab your favorite beverage and make yourself comfortable and we'll get started. Liz, can you hear me okay? Great, thanks. Hello everyone, and welcome to our 8th session in our Woodland Conferences webinar mini-series of 2021. Yes, you're stuck with me again. My name is Don Cameron. I'm a regional forester with the Department of Natural Resources and Renewables. That is formerly Lands and Forestry. I'm still getting used to it. It is my pleasure to be your MC for this event. In the spirit of meaningful reconciliation, we acknowledge our presence in the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people in what is now known today as Nova Scotia, a small part of Mi'kmaqui. The Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1725 and subsequent treaties remain foundational to the relationship between the Mi'kmaq people and all Canadians. We are all treaty people. This conference mini-series is a variation of our annual Spring Woodland Conference series, which we've been organizing across the province annually for many years. Despite the pandemic, we are pleased to be able to offer interesting and educational presentations this year in this online format. Hopefully it will be safe to meet again in person for the 2022 Spring Conferences, for which we have begun the planning process. And to whet your appetite, the Central Region, for example, is scheduled for Saturday, April 2nd. We will host the event in Millbrook, just outside of Truro. It will include many interesting Indigenous-related topics and speakers, including Gerald Glode, who was so well received in his last presentation he gave to the conference several years ago. A few comments about the WebEx AV setup that you're using this evening. You as participants are automatically muted, and your video is turned off for the benefit of the presenters. Your names are invisible to each other, but are visible to we event organizers. There will be opportunity for you to ask questions through the evening. There's a Q&A panel on the upper right side of your screen where you can post your questions. Just click on the arrow beside Q&A and click on all presenters. You will be able to forward questions to us. I will read your questions out to the presenters and they will answer verbally. Depending on the number of questions, we may not get to all of them during the actual time allotted, but our goal is to send out answers after the session today to any questions that are not answered tonight. Any polling questions for you will appear on the right of the screen below the Q&A section. The polling question provides an opportunity for immediate responses from you, the participants. Again, you just click on all presenters. Please note that in case you would like to go back and review some part of this event, or if you know of someone interested who is unable to be with us today, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted online at nswoods.ca. That's nswoods.ca for future viewing. The previous webinar sessions that were recorded to date include Forest Sector and Forestry Transition Team Update, Private Land Stewardship, Invasive Species and Forest Pests, the Climate Change and Forest Carbon, and most recently, Biodiversity, Wildlife and Species at Risk, Forestry Business Planning and Potential, and Woodland Stewardship Planning, Pathways to Success. So there have been many presentations on a wide variety of topics. The link for any and all of these recorded sessions is available also at the nswoods.ca website. I should add that thus far we've had more than 400 viewings of these recorded sessions. And for today's session we have more than 100 individuals registered to participate from all over. So note that today's speaker bios and any speaker handouts will be available also through that website. The format for this evening, our presenters will each provide their presentations without interruptions, followed by time for your questions and the answers. The event today will run until approximately 8:30 p.m. We're happy to be able to offer this special COVID version of the Woodland Conference Series. And for those of you who are regulars at our annual conferences, you may recall that we create agendas for each conference based on the feedback that we receive from you, the participants. So we ask you to please provide feedback to us at the end of today's session. Also, if you are a regular, you'll know now that we're famous for providing pretty good door prizes. We don't have the chainsaw, but tonight is no exception. We have a prize. One of you lucky participants will win a new retractable handsaw by random draw shortly after this webinar. The name of the lucky winner will be drawn from names from the registration list, and we'll contact the winner over the next few days. Today, we had 2 random draws to select the winner from those that participated in last month's Dave Sutherland webinar, and a second lucky winner from those of you that completed our surveys that we distributed to get your feedback and ideas for future sessions. So the lucky winners are, number 1, last month's webinar participant winner is Sean Scott, and he will win a hand pruning saw. Congratulations to Sean. And the survey participant winner is Adrian, I'm never sure how to pronounce this, Adrian, Martinicu of North Nova Forestry, and he will win an Outdoor Adventure Prize pack. And we will get those prizes to both of you in time for Christmas. Okay, it's time to get the main show started. So, over the years of conferences, it's been obvious that woodland owners of all levels of experience are often interested in learning more about today's topic, which is woodlot access roads in general. Roads can be well done or not so well done and cause any number of resulting issues if not so well done. Today, we are fortunate to have 3 speakers who are representing 3 different organizations who have direct roles and responsibilities for roads. We will hear from Annamarie Burgess of the Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change Department, the government department that has the responsibility for establishing environmental standards and the monitoring and inspection process and responsibilities. Our second speaker will be Darcey MacBain of the Department of Public Works, which is formerly TIR, the department that is responsible for construction, maintenance, decommissioning, and safe use of public roads, among countless other responsibilities. And the final speaker will be Todd Burgess of the Forest Nova Scotia Gas Tax Road Program, which provides road funding for woodland owners and operators. So, we will now invite Annamarie to take to the air. Annamarie is an engineer and the lead for the Watercourse Alteration Program within NSEE. She will be focusing today on watercourse crossings. Welcome, Annamarie. The mic's all yours.
Good evening, everyone. Let me get my screen up and running. Okay. There we go. Okay, good evening. I'm very pleased to be invited to speak with you tonight. And so while I had a very brief introduction of myself, I'm hoping to have a brief introduction of everyone who's with us tonight. So you should be seeing a poll there in the right-hand corner as Don described. And I'm just looking to see, who's had a chance to work with environment and climate change staff before. Perhaps you've completed work under permit with our department before, or you might be an individual who's a professional, applying for these approvals and notifications, or undertaking the work as well. So we'll have that up for a minute and then you can respond quickly. Carrie will close up for us when most of us have responded. There we go. Okay, so I believe everyone should be able to see the results. And this is great. So we've got a really wide range of folks who are here with us tonight. And so my goals for tonight, I'm hoping to share with you either if this is new information, an introduction, or a refresher on some of the key terms and processes that my team is responsible for. We're the Water Resources Management team. Explain a little bit about why and what we regulate, and really all towards the goal of better water management across the province and for your sites and properties specifically. So water resources overall, so our team is responsible for environmental protection and high quality of life for Nova Scotians, balancing a wide range of interests, and this is for surface water specifically tonight, talking about watercourse alterations and wetland alterations, because that's of course what you're going to be interacting with when we're looking at our access roads. So what is a watercourse? I'm sure you've got a pretty intuitive sense of what a watercourse is, but within the context of the permitting process and the regulations, it's often a little bit wider than how most people think about it. So it is both the bed and bank of all of our surface water. So our rivers, our streams, our lakes, etc. And it also includes areas whether there's water or not. So you might be able to picture channels that are conveying water in the spring, but not all the time during the whole year. So this diagram here in the bottom is a pretty simplified, really easy to follow cross section of a water course where we can show where the bed of the water course is there in the bottom. That's the area that is commonly covered by water, and then also shows the extent of the bank, which is often a bit more challenging to identify because it's the area at its fullest natural state. But again, it's areas whether or not there's water there at that given moment. And of course, we want to be cognizant of that because if there isn't water there now, there could be later. And when we're planning our roads, these are the situations that we want to avoid. And our regulatory processes are really geared around environmental risk, right? So we do have areas that if you're outside of the bank, that's considered to be little to no risk. And so you're outside of the regulatory program. If you're inside the regulatory program, we have two tiers of work, again, related to risk. So we'll talk about those a little bit. So our low risk program is what's called the notification process. And so these crossings, these are bridges or culverts, if you meet a range of conditions. And what it does is it speaks to the drainage area, the watercourse slope, the size of the crossing. And so what it does is it sets a container around really common work that we're able to really well describe that follows the requirements of what's the document there shown on the right. It's called the Watercourse Alteration Standard. And what that is basically like your playbook for how to undertake these construction activities. And if you're able to follow this and meet the conditions, then your project can go forward pretty easily. So the notification as opposed to the approval process. So we've just described the notification process, right? So that's your project that follows the standards. Generally speaking, you're not altering the bed of the watercourse aside from installing a culvert. And what that process looks like is submitting a form. It's processed by our clerks. You get that receipt and work can initiate basically as soon as you receive that receipt, of course, inside our summer timing window. The additional management of risk that we have on the notification process is that the work needs to be undertaken by someone who's been certified and trained through the course offered through one of the colleges for the notification process. In contrast, your approval process covers basically everything else. So if you're doing any work that's different than the standard, if you're doing work inside the bed of the watercourse, then what that means is not necessarily what you're doing is particularly unusual. It's pretty common for some bridges. If you've got a very wide watercourse, if something is braided, then you might need a pier in that watercourse. But what the main distinction is that with the approval application process, it's reviewed by staff. So these are simply the circumstances where we want to make sure that we're working with you to have a project that's going to be undertaken in a really well-designed way. So of course, the number one question that we get is identifying a watercourse. And a watercourse can sometimes flow underground and then come back up to the surface, or have multiple flow paths like you can see in this picture on the left-hand side. And depending on the season, a watercourse can also change flow paths or only carry water in certain parts of the year. So when you're on your site, you can look for a defined channel, the absence of vegetation. But of course, if you have a question about whether or not something is a watercourse, that's a great opportunity to call your local ECC office, and one of the inspectors or the duty officer can assist you. So here is another excellent question. So this poll is going to pop up in the right-hand side in just a moment. I want you to think about, is a ditch a watercourse alteration? So let's see if that poll can come up. I'm not seeing it on my screen this time, so I'm just going to keep going. It's a yes or a no, so you can answer it to your own mind. And in this case, this brings us to what is an inside and outside the watercourse alteration program. So these are exceptions and exemptions. So if a ditch is constructed but doesn't convey a watercourse, then in that case, a ditch is just a ditch and it's not something that needs a permit. So really common case, you can picture that you've got your road at the bottom of a slope and you know you have overland flow coming, but it's not in a channel. So there isn't a watercourse there. And so in that case, you're going to put a ditch on the side of your road, and that's simply road construction. Similarly, many maintenance activities, if you're doing it outside of the bed of the watercourse, you can maintain your structures or your road year over year. And similarly, we described cases where most commonly a bridge that could go from the top of bank to the top of bank. So you're outside of that regulatory envelope again. And so in that case, you're outside of the permitting process. So let's touch about wetlands now. So wetlands, again, much like watercourses, they can have a variety of names. These are your marshes, your swamps. Here at the bottom, these two pictures are two very common wetlands that occur in our forests. So that's a shrub swamp and a tree swamp. Best ways to try to identify if where you are is a wetland is presence of water that you can see, very soft ground, or plants that you know that like very wet.
It looks like we lost Annamarie.
Yeah, I don't think the last couple of her slides were changing on her.
No.
Must be an internet problem.
Is she gone completely?
Yep.
Well, there's a first.
The first stormy day we've had for this.
Okay. Shall we shift gears to the next one and hope that she gets back later?
Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay. Well, sorry about that, folks. Again, that's the first time, but Murphy's Law has to happen once in a while. So our second speaker, and this is going to bring Darcey on quickly. Our second speaker is Darcey MacBain, Manager of Asset Information Services with the Department of Public Works. The focus of Darcey's presentation is accessing woodlots from public roads. Thanks for coming, Darcey. It's all yours.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Pleased to be here. As Don mentioned, I'm a manager of Asset Information Services, but actually I've only been doing that for about a year, and for the last 30-some years I've been a manager and a supervisor in the field, so dealing a lot with roads, all types of roads. So I'm going to try to share my screen now. We'll see how that goes. All right. Good to go. So the objective of tonight's presentation is to talk about woodlot driveway access to provincial roads, and we'll talk about permitting, the process, requirements, costs, and time, and K-class roads. You know what they are, the definition. Talk about the K-class road policy, permitting to work on these roads, a process, and costs. So a woodlot or a forestry driveway access is classified as a commercial access as opposed to a residential. Makes sense. You're not building a house in there. It's going to be used to remove forest products. So it's classified as commercial. The main difference between a commercial and a residential is the stopping site distance, which we'll get into in a second. A little different methodology for measuring the stopping site distance. And also the maintenance and replacement of a commercial entrance is the responsibility of the property owner. So if you want to put a forestry road onto a provincial roadway, if it's residential, although you'll put it in originally at the residential cost, any maintenance after that or replacement, it would be done by the province. But if it's a commercial entrance, that's done by the forestry owner or the commercial owner. So there's a typical forestry road access on the right. That looks like it's a few years old. That's up off the Liscombe Game Sanctuary, I think. Up on the 374. A couple of things to look at on this slide are you can see that it slopes away right from the edge of the road, so the water that accumulates here won't run onto the road. It's got good sight distance, hard to tell here, but you can see quite a ways up to the north, and also you can see to the south. So it's a safe access. Looks like there's a pretty good ditch, probably a culvert going through there, and good drainage. So it's going to stay in good condition. That's probably been there 10 or 15 years, so it's pretty good access. There's another one. I think this is just north of Beaver Dam off the 224. This one I took one for the slope down the road, but you can see it kind of slopes and then comes back up at 2%. So this slopes back up the road again to try to keep the water off the road. Ditch, well marked with some blue ribbon, obviously to let some forest contractor know which road they're supposed to be on. Both of those are, typical. I wanted to not take a new one, but one that's been there for a few years, just to kind of show you how they work, and you can tell that this is still fairly good condition. I'm going to show you the permit now. Hopefully this works. Maybe. Okay, so can somebody tell me if you can see the permit? Hopefully. Don?
Yes, we can, Darcey.
Okay. So this is the work within highway right-of-way permit that someone would fill out if they want to put an access onto a public road. Not going to go through it detail by detail, but I will point a few things out. So obviously the applicant information, that stuff is pretty easy. Here you would check whatever box applies. So this one would be access to a public highway, roadway for the purpose of, and you put other, and you put forestry. The work would not disturb the existing road service, so not there, and you're not building a structure. It's just an access. So be the first box, and another you click other and forestry. This permit, we're working to get it online so that you can fill it out online, submit it, but right now you can fill it out. It's a fillable PDF, but you would have to actually print it off and sign it and send it in. And then this is here was check type of structure or access you require. Well, this would be a commercial, and then you would just put in commercial and put forestry. Where we can find it. You don't have to have GPS coordinates, but it's helpful for us to find it. But you can put a distance, kilometers, north, south, east, or west of an intersection or something so we can find it. Sketches are great. A lot of people use a aerial photograph or maybe Google Earth and it'll attach that and mark the access on it. That helps us. It's also very helpful if you mark the location on the property where you want the access or the driveway so that they can easily be found by our engineering aides. How you want to receive it. It says here, provide a certified check, money order, or bank draft. We can also accept in some area offices Visa or debit for the deposit. I will say though that we don't take uncertified checks. And down here, the number 6, it says, I am the owner of the property of the location to which this permit applies. So if you're the owner that owns the adjacent property and put the access on, that's great. Check yes. If it's no, though, if you have to go over somebody else's property to get your forestry access, you would have to provide permission in writing from the property owner, obviously, for the access you require. So just remember that. And there's a sketch, local office, things like that. So, and down here is stuff that we would be doing, and I'll get into the stopping site distance measurement and slope and grade, things like that in a few minutes. So I'm gonna close this. If we get back to the presentation. Again. There we go. Stopping site distance, or SSD. Stopping site distance is how long it takes a vehicle to stop once they see an obstruction. So obviously you're driving along at 80 kilometers an hour and you see something and you need to stop. There's a reaction time, and then you hit the brakes and you'll come to a stop, and they give you a little bit of a cushion too there. So that's what stopping site distance is. Obviously you can't put a driveway, especially a forestry driveway that may have slow moving equipment moving in or out, or large trucks. You can't put a forestry driveway on the crest of a hill or on a bad horizontal alignment because it doesn't allow for the stopping site distance. So we do have a minimum stopping site distance that you have to have before you can put an access somewhere, and we measure that. So we measure from the middle of the access by placing 150 millimeter target or cone at the shoulder. So it's a 6-inch cone. The observer, or in our case would probably be the EA, approaches the target ensuring eye height of about 1.05 meters, which represents where you would sit in an ordinary car until the object comes into view. So that's done from both directions, speed limit and slope. The grade of the road will affect the minimum stopping site distance required. And you think about it, if you're coming down the hill towards an access, it's going to take you longer to stop than if you're going uphill towards an access. So this is a stopping site distance chart. The actual chart we use is a lot more complex than this, but this one I thought would be one that we could share and can explain easily. So for instance, if the highway has or the roadway has a design speed, I put an example there of 80 kilometers per hour, and it's got a fairly gentle slope of 3% downgrade. You would need 136 meters to stop your vehicle if you saw something on the road. On the other side, so now you're on the other side of the axis, so the hill's going down, and if you're coming up the other way, you would only need 123 meters. So that's kind of a guide. That chart I thought I'd put in here so you can use it as a guide if you ever want to check your own access. You can pace it or measure it with a tape or whatever, so you know how long you need it. I always say a rule of thumb: if you can see 150 meters in each direction on most secondary roads, they're 80 kilometers an hour, you're in pretty good shape. So if you can see 150 yards, 150 meters, you're in pretty good shape to put an access in there. If it's less than that, then you're going to have to start looking at your accesses. So just some requirements, and I mentioned before, because a lot of folks don't do this, and I know that the field always wanted to make sure that we mark that you mark the access in the field. So if you could put a couple of stakes in, we always say for residential to put them in 7 meters apart where you want the driveway, but for forestry access, they're usually a little wider, so 9 or 10 meters, and you put them back on the shoulder a little bit. Nice to have orange tape on them or paint them so that we can see them, and those would help the engineering aid find the actual access. The other thing that you can do, if it's close to your property line or a property line, it's nice to ribbon the property line, because there are some rules regarding how close you can put a driveway to a property line. So it's nice. And the EAs that go out here, the engineering aides that go out here and do the measurements, are looking to make sure that they can find a spot that's suitable. They're trying to work with you. So the more information they have, the better it is to get it passed. There is actually no cost to the permit, the work within highway right-of-way permit. There is a deposit. For a residential driveway, they run around $300, depending on how much damage or how steep a slope may be along the side of the road, or whatever. Some area managers might ask a little bit more for a forestry access, but 300 is usually the norm. It's just a deposit. It's a deposit that will be returned once the driveway is installed, the inspection complete and pass. It takes about 10 days to review and approve the permit. And that's just, they get the permit, they locate it, they have to schedule a time to go out in the field, do the measurements, bring it back. The EA will prepare it for the area manager, take some photos, things like that, and then they'll bring it back, and you get a chance to he can approve it or not, or ask any questions. All right, so that was basically the end of the presentation on the forestry accesses. Pleased at the end to take some questions, but that's that part. And all those links before will show you all the different how to install them, things like that. Let's jump ahead to the K-class for forestry access. So K-class roads. K-class roads. What are K-class roads? So K-class roads are basically they're a listed unmaintained provincial road. So if you've heard people use terms like the old post road or the old Halifax road, those type of names, a lot of times those were roads that, you know, ran between communities years ago, and we got realigned, and they were, for all intensive purposes, abandoned by government, but we still own them. So the province, and when I say the province, that's all of us, we own that road. It's an access, it's a provincial road. It just isn't maintained. So this is what I wouldn't say is actually typical. It's a pretty good K-class road, this one. This is probably more typical. They're pretty rough. They haven't been maintained, like I say. People tend to use them. You get a lot of ATV traffic on them. People might use them for getting back and forth to woodlots already. So, like I said, they're provincially owned, listed on maintained public roadbeds or right-of-ways. Normally, they run about 10 meters wide, or 20 meters wide, 10 meters either side, 60-60, one chain. And they cannot be blocked because they're a provincial right-of-way, and they can be used to access property. So they can be used to get to property. But the important thing to remember there is they can't be blocked. So even though you go in and spend some money and fix it up, you can't stop somebody else from using it. Just to be aware of that. There is a fairly long and expansive policy regarding upgrading of K-class roads. I'm not going to get into that. It's more to do with upgrading a K-class road for development purposes. And that gets a bit more complicated because for development purposes, they have to be brought to a maintainable standard. And really forestry, you know, an individual forest lot owner is probably not going to bring it to that level. So we've kind of got a watered down version of it that the area managers go with. And basically it means that we will allow upgrading K-class roads for forestry access. And that work is completed under a work within highway right-of-way permit. Again, same permit as we had before, just to fill it a little bit differently. And we'll be asking all kinds of questions and asking for make sure that all the permitting, any watercourse alteration, bridges and culverts, and we'll be talking about you know, if there's any environmental concerns or wetlands in the area. And also we want to make sure that sediment and erosion control measures are in place, and there may actually have to be a sediment erosion plan to ensure that it doesn't, we don't silt up any of the brooks, streams, or lakes, rivers. The upgrading itself depending on the condition of the road, can be expensive, but it depends a lot on the current condition. So this kind of addresses that. The work within highway right-of-way permit is submitted to the area office, and the process time and the cost for these are dependent on many factors. Obviously, the lengths of section to be upgraded. So if you're upgrading a half a kilometer or a kilometer to access your woodlot, that's a lot different than if you got to upgrade 10 kilometers. Obviously, the condition of the road, if it's just basically a cart path and it's in hard shape, then it's going to be costing a lot more and taking a lot more time to make sure that it's done correctly. Watercourse crossings, well, you have to have your watercourse alteration. And if there's watercourse crossings in there that are culverts and or structures that are in great shape, great. If they're not in great shape, it can cost you a lot of money or in time to get everything in place. So to consider, the more complete your permit is and the detail provided with the permit, then the more likely it is to get done in a fairly quick manner. There is a refundable deposit again, roughly 10 to 20% of the cost of upgrade, and then once the upgrade is done and it's been inspected, then you get that money back. And that was pretty quick. Now say questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, folks, time for question and answers. As people are thinking about this, Darcey, a couple questions that came to mind were on the K-Class road, which I've had some experience in the past. As far as liability issues, how does that work in terms of if a landowner wants to make use and do some fixing up of the road? They have to go through you, obviously, as you mentioned, to get everything approved and done. But if an issue arises, somebody comes along and uses it and hits something that they've done, where's the liability stand on that?
So if it's built and you have the permit, and I'm not a lawyer, but if it's built and you have the permit and the area manager has signed off, the liability would lie with the province.
Okay.
That would be my answer anyway.
Yeah, and I guess it comes back to that old due diligence. If somebody does something stupid, they're going to pay for it.
It's been my opinion that if people are going to sue because of something, they're going to sue everybody anyway. So they're probably going to sue the guy that built the road. They're going to sue the province and everybody in between. So
right. Another thing that came to mind is if you have a driveway, a woodlot driveway meeting a road, do you have any requirements in terms of visibility as you meet the highway as far as vegetation control at that intersection?
So hopefully that the stopping sight distance is good enough that without having to do yearly maintenance to the brush, and we hope that that's that way. If it's not, yeah, you're right. I think it would be due diligence again on the part of the forest property owner to keep that access clean, just like you would at your own residential driveway, to try to keep it clear. It's for your safety and the safety of your employees.
Makes sense. You're using it the most. So yeah. Okay, I have a question from Leslie here for you. How many permits for forestry access would you get in the course of a year? And the second part of that, is there a time of year when you get more of these?
So I've been an area manager in 3 different areas. I was in Lunenburg, Queens for a couple of years. I was in Halifax East for 5, and I was in Halifax Suburban with 5. Now, as you can imagine, Halifax Suburban had its own headaches, but we didn't get a lot of forestry permits. We did get some. I would say that on average, we probably get, I'm going to say probably probably a dozen or so a year for forestry, specifically for forestry. It'll be a little higher in, places like probably Cumberland, in Pictou and those areas. So yeah, they're getting a number of them.
Okay. And the K-Class roads are of interest to people. Is there a map available that shows the K-Class roads in the province?
There is. It's available on our public access site. I didn't put up there's some issues with it. I didn't put up it's called the Highway Public Access Viewer. I didn't put up the link, but I think we can put K-class. There are K-class roads. Not all of them aren't going to be identified, but there's a good number of them on there, I think.
Good idea. It's good to know. Next one. How many kilometers of K-class roads in the province? Are there any areas of the province that have more of these K-class roads than others?
I would say that it's probably fairly evenly distributed. Most of them came when they realigned roads. So just to give you an example, I'm pretty familiar with some, but those that are in around that live around maybe the Enfield area and stuff there, the old Trunk 2 back in the day was called the Old Holland Road. I thought it was Holling Road, but it's actually Holland Road. And as you go, there's the old Truro Road, the old Halifax Road. So usually they were named from community to community, and they're pretty evenly distributed. There's sections of them down along the 1, the section along the 3, all through the province. So I wouldn't say there's more in any one area than the other, but there's quite a few of them around, that's for sure.
Okay, thanks for that. Another question from Leslie. Do you have any requirements or talk to landowners about traffic control on the public highway at the junction during the construction of these driveways or entrances to the woodlot?
Yeah, there's a condition right on the permit that says that if you're affecting traffic at all, you have to follow the temporary workplace traffic control manual, and that would include signing or traffic control persons. That would be a condition of the work that they do. Normally, and some forest contractors have their own equipment and stuff, but normally a contractor would be putting them in, and the contractor would need to provide that traffic control.
Okay. Claude wonders, how can I determine how far the K-class road goes as some continue on? So I guess it's trying to differentiate where the K-class ends. Maybe.
Yeah, that's a great question, because sometimes we're trying to determine that.
Yeah.
As in the definition, you heard listed on maintained. Well, people that maybe have historically lived on a K-class road, they think it should be listed right to their house or their forestry lot or whatever it happens to be. And realistically, it can get tricky, but there are every area office and provincially we do have a list and where we have identified where they are. So contact your area office and we'll go from there.
Great. Last one from Claude. Last one. If ditches are filled, this is from Alex. If ditches are filled by heavy trucking, is that lumber hauler responsible regarding that ditch? Do you understand that one? So the ditches are messed up, I guess, by trucking.
K-class roads you're talking about, you think? Or if it's on the K-class road and they were to overload their trucks, or maybe they were pushing the clay back into the ditch, closing up the ditch, yeah, they would be responsible for bringing it back. That would be that would be a condition on the permit that it has to be left in a reasonable state. So yeah.
Okay, we'll make this one our last one. If there's an existing entrance on a woodlot, but the road it accesses is not built to a Class D standard and a major upgrade will be required, will an access permit be required?
I'm not quite sure. Can you try that again?
Yeah, sure. So if there's an existing entrance on a woodlot,
okay,
but the road it accesses is not built to a Class D standard, and therefore a major upgrade will be required, will an access permit be required for that case?
I'm going to say that a work within highway right-of-way permit would be required, in that any work within 100 meters of the center line of a public highway requires a permit. So I'm going to say yes, you would require the permit, because you're not really supposed to do any work within 100 meters of a public highway, like disturbing the soil, without a work within highway right away.
And I suppose that so-called road could be any shape of road that could have been there for decades, maybe before the highway even became a higher level highway or something like that. So
yes.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. All right. Well, thanks, Darcey. That brings an end to that. Thank you for answering questions. Thank you for the presentation, and we're going to re-invite Annamarie to come back. So thank you very much, Darcey.
Thank you.
Annamarie, sorry about what happened there. I'm not sure how the gremlins did that, but are you with us? Would you like to start, or would you like to continue where you left off?
I would. I understand that we lost around trying to ask the poll about ditches.
Right,
So I'm
yes.
gonna pick up from there. Sure. There we are. Okay. Oop. So we'll scroll ahead. So recalling what we discussed about watercourses, and so the final question was the distinction between watercourses and ditches. And of course, I think I cut out around here. So what I wanted to make sure that folks understood was that a ditch, if it's not interacting with a watercourse, so if you're constructing a ditch on the side of your road, then that is not something that is permitted through ECC. If perhaps you have, a side slope and there are two small channels, two small water courses, and you're wanting to only construct one crossing culvert, and you're going to use a ditch to bring the water courses together to one crossing culvert, in that case, you're altering the flow of that water course. And so that's where you would need a water course alteration. But if the ditch doesn't interact with the water course and is just dealing with overland flow, then that's outside the regulatory program. Okay. So, as I said, ditches would be an exemption to the program, and wanted to also just reinforce that a lot of like maintenance activities, so year over year, if you're coming back and working on your crossings, if you're doing it above the bed of the water course and outside of the water, then that's nothing that we need to have an additional permit for. And of course, if you're constructing a new crossing or a temporary crossing that goes from top of bank to top of bank, then that's also outside of the permitting process. So I wanted to switch gears and talk about wetlands, because of course a water course can intersect with a wetland, and these are also features that you might cross as you're installing a new road. Wetlands have many names, so marshes, swamps, etc. So two common types of swamps that we see in our forests are here pictured at the bottom. And they're also difficult to identify sometimes. So again, our regional staff can assist you with that. We'll come out to site and talk you through it. But if you're seeing poorly drained soils, plants that that really like wet conditions, that's a really good indication that you're getting into a wetland. So our goals for wetland management is to have no net loss of, just general wetlands, but then also our wetlands of special significance, we really try to have no alterations of those at all. So wetland of special significance, there's a list of criteria, and there's a long list. You can find that in the policy document, but really the most common ones, of course, salt marshes, that's easy to picture, but also wetlands that are within designated areas. So the wilderness areas, protected areas, that sorts of thing. A new development in the wetland program is that if you end up coming in for an alteration approval, you'll be asked to do an assessment for the functional significance of the wetland, and that's where this new classification for a wetland of special significance, if it has a high function, that would also fall into this designation. That assessment is only done by wetland specialists. So the alteration for a wetland, it's any activity even adjacent to the wetland that can affect its function. So infilling, draining, but even sometimes depending on how you do your grading, you can do a bit of infilling or be shifting how water flows over the surface, which could cause flooding. So we really do encourage folks to be very careful around wetlands and talk to our staff about that. For the wetland program, there's not a notification process. It is strictly approvals. So that's an application. That application needs to be submitted with an assessment by a wetland specialist. and then that gets reviewed by our departmental staff, and then it goes through issuing an approval process. But what the wetland program also has, like Watercourses, is a list of exceptions. So we have many small wetlands in the province, and altering those, if they're under 100 square meters, those are simply exempt. Or if the road that you're constructing is less than 10 meters wide and you're going across a wetland area, but you're altering an area less than 600 square meters, then that is also exempt. And of course, I'm sure you're all familiar with, I just wanted to mention, unrelated to road construction was that harvesting activities itself for forestry is exempt from a wetland alteration approval process. And I hesitate. Okay, we're going to try the poll. I see that it's pulled up, and I think I'm still with you. So I wanted to close out with asking you this question about who can actually do this work. So if you know that you need an approval or notification, who's allowed to do that construction activity for you? Give that a minute. So what I wanted to take the opportunity was to remind you that, you know, our approval processes are based on risk, and part of how we manage those risks in the province is by having qualified and certified individuals carry out these activities. And so that is the end of my presentation, and I am happy to take questions as well. And I will take questions today, but of course, if you have questions in the future, you can contact your local office. There's always a duty officer who's available to answer any questions from the public about our programs. And on our website, which is listed there on the lower left, you'll find several public-facing guides. The wetland program just updated several of the guides, and they're excellent. The watercourse alteration guide is also very well done. It's a little bit hard to find, but if you look for it, it's there, and it gives you a really great list of advice about how to undertake some of these activities. Okay, so I will stop sharing.
There's your results, Annamarie, of your questions.
Fantastic. Excellent. Yeah, gotta love a classic multiple choice. Always take D for both B and C.
Annamarie, excuse me. One of the things you mentioned was the wetlands of high functional significance. That's determined by one of your experts or your staff. What kind of considerations do they use? That's because that's quite an addition, and I'm just wondering, how do they determine that?
Yeah, so there's an assessment process that's been developed. And actually, so that assessment process is undertaken by anyone who has taken the course to learn that process. It is called the WESP AC. Acronyms, I'll get all that acronyms wrong if I try to guess it. But that is, so it's a made in Nova Scotia process, and it looks at habitat, hydrology, plant species, and calibrates it against several standardized functions. So for the different classifications of wetlands, so if it's a bog, we have a bunch of bogs across the province that are our base points, and so they're contrasted to these base scenarios, and if they provide higher ecological performance, then that's what brings them into that process. But you're right, it is an addition to that program.
Mm-hmm.
It is a requirement of that program starting in the spring, so it is very new.
Okay. And do you know how much it's been used, that particular part of it?
Yeah, it's a process that's been in development for at least 5 years. as they've been working on it. And so it's a process that, as I understand it, existed previous to the province formally adopting it. So it's had, hopefully, tires kicked, and it should be a smooth transition. Yeah.
Okay. And a little bit more detail in terms of landowners that are relatively new to this. We always have new people, which is what this is all about, bringing some new people in as well as upgrading others' experience and understanding. For those that have had not any experience with your department and they're not very familiar with the terminology maybe too, but they want to put a little bridge or a crossing or something on their woodlot. Could you just speak to that from a sort of beginner's perspective, what they should do?
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, so there's the guide to altering watercourse. If you like having things with pictures so you can review things multiple times, that's a really great option. Contacting the local, we call them the regional offices. They're not the area offices. It's all the jargon. But getting a hold of the local office, our inspectors will come out to site and walk it with you and talk you through it. So that's, if that's a better way for you to learn, that's available to you as well. So from a very talking it through right now, so if you know about where you want your road to go, what you want to do is minimize the length of the watercourse. So as much as you can, if you know you have a channel, and sometimes they're hard to see, but if you've got a very clearly defined channel, you want to cross it in an area where it's not very bendy. Watercourses love to move. So choosing a good watercourse crossing location means that, you know, like your bridge is going to be more stable or your culvert's going to be more stable. Culverts or bridges, they both have pros and cons. Bridge, you might be able to get that in faster. I know some folks use temporary crossings, so they'll put it in, they'll do their work that season, they'll come back, they'll take it out, and they'll put it at the next site. So that might be efficient if you have multiple locations. But if you're wanting to just build something simple, if you're able to construct a bridge, they're usually best just because then you can go bank to bank and just stay out of the water course. So they're a little bit more foolproof, but they're sometimes harder to construct or more expensive if you're trying to get something precast. And so culverts are a great option. And culverts, usually what that means is you're going to need to get a hold of someone who's a certified installer and sizer. And there's a list of certified individuals on our website, so you can find that, find somebody in your area and give them a call, and they can work through the design process with you.
Thank you. I was just going to ask that part of it. Great. Somebody asked, Leslie asked, who pays for the high significance wetland assessment and approximately how much does it cost?
All the work to undertake, like developing the information for your application, that's the responsibility of the applicant. So if you were into a wetland application that needed that level of study, then that responsibility would be on you.
Fine, thanks for that. Okay, I guess that's it. Well, Annamarie, thanks very much for your time and persistence in coming back. We appreciate your time and effort.
Having you back.
Thank you very much, and we'll be moving on now. So we'll talk to you at the end. And so we have a special edition tonight. I'm going to wear my DNR hat for a few moments to talk about access over Crown land for forestry operations on private lands. So let's say, for instance, you want to make use of an existing Crown land road. If a commercial forestry operation is to occur on private lands that will utilize a Crown road for access without a legal right-of-way agreement, the proponent, let's say that's you, of the private operation, is responsible for acquiring a local letter of authority, which we call an LOA, from the local Department of Natural Resources and Renewable Office. The LOA will identify any restrictions placed on the use of the Crown Road and will also have conditions pertaining to the road's condition both prior to and following the proponent's use. So that LOA can also permit the proponent to perform road maintenance operations on a Crown Road to facilitate wood product access and removal. Proponent must supply a detailed map of the proposed road use and details of any maintenance work that's required. Typically, these approvals take 4 to 6 weeks depending on the area and the complexity of the area in which the work is proposed. So that's the use of existing Crown Road for private land harvesting, for example. Now, let's say a construction of a new trail or road on Crown land is required in order to get to that private land forestry operations. So, if a commercial forestry operation is to occur on private lands that will require an access trail, forwarder trail or otherwise, or a new road constructed on Crown land to access that forestry operation on private land, and this is without a legal right-of-way agreement, so an informal method, the proponent of the private operations must apply again to the local DNR office for a local letter of authority, LOA. The proponent must complete an application form, and that's called the Use Crown Land, Sell, or Donate Land to the Province. That's what the form's called. The proponent must supply a complete written description of work proposed and a detailed map or shapefile of the proposed route. The local DNR forest technician is responsible to create a shapefile of proposed route if the proponent is unable to provide that. Typically, these approvals take 4 to 6 weeks, depending again on the area and the complexity of the area of the work within. So the final one is the right-of-way or an easement that some of you would be very familiar with. So the right-of-way, in order to do this. If an individual or business requires a legal right-of-way or easement over Crown land, an application via the form, again, called Use Crown Land, Sell, or Donate Land to the Province, must be completed in full and submitted to the Land Administration Division in Halifax, in the DNR office, that is. Easements or right-of-ways have fees associated with applications, and proponents are required to survey the entire easement area over Crown land at their expense. Easements typically can take up to 2 years to receive approval. And if you want more information, please go to the link, Use of Crown Land, Sell, or Donate Land to the Province. Again, there's a link that you can go to, and that is Use of Crown Land, Sell, or Donate Land to the Province. So that's a little information on the use of Crown land for private land harvesting purposes. Okay, shifting gears, back to the speakers. Our final speaker today is Todd Burgess of Forest Nova Scotia. Todd is a professional forester, and his topic today is Good Roads are Key to Good Woodland Stewardship, How Forest Nova Scotia Can Help. Todd, take it away.
Great, thanks, Don. I'm just going to share my screen. Moment here. Okay, can everyone see that?
Not yet.
Okay. Really? Okay, I've got it up. Bear with me. See it yet?
Nope. Here it's coming. There you go, Todd.
Sorry about that. Sorry about the delay. So, has anyone else been listening to those last two presenters? The thought that comes to my mind is roads are complicated. And guess what? They're expensive. So Forest Nova Scotia has an access road program that can help you financially with that. But before I get into too much of that, I would like to talk about Forest Nova Scotia for just a minute, in case there's any new people here who aren't aware of who we are or what we do. We're an organization of woodland owners that we've got Christmas tree growers, maple syrup producers, silviculture contractors that maybe have leases on some property, some harvest contractors that maybe have stumpage agreements, pellet mills, sawmills, pulp and paper mills. So we've got a large membership. In fact, I said here 600 members, but we're closer to 700 now. But 85% of our membership are small private woodland owners. And we advocate on behalf of the forest sector. And actually, since 1934, we've been advocating on behalf of the forest sector. And a lot of people may see us promoting sawmills or pulp mills or trying to support the industry, and they say we're an industry, but really we're advocating on behalf of private landowners because we need a healthy sector. We need healthy sawmills. We need healthy contractors, harvest contractors and silviculture contractors for the private landowners to be successful. Now, in the past, some of the issues that we've sort of been defending has been a little bit controversial. So recently, you may have seen some of these campaigns come up on Facebook or some of our Twitter feeds where we're trying to build some more positivity into the forest sector. So you may have seen some of these ads come up, or it may be in the Herald or some radio ads. This one here with a rolling pin that you may have seen. So that's what we do. We advocate on behalf of the forest sector, but we also have a road program. So we can help you with your woodlot. And from the last two presenters, Annamarie and Darcey, managing your woodlot can be complicated and it can be expensive. And there's lots of details with it. So our Forest Access Road program can help offset some of the costs of building a road on your woodlot. Now there's other expenses, of course, on a woodlot, but there's other organizations that can help you with that, such as these Woodland Conference series. You go back and look at some of the recordings, you want to have questions about managing your woodlot, you can look at some of those. Lands and Forestry has the Woodlot Home Study Program. Some of the co-ops will often have a forester or a technician that will go out and look at your woodlot and give you some advice. The Association for Sustainable Forestry also has a silviculture program to help fund some silviculture treatments on your woodland. But one of the biggest expenses, of course, is road construction and watercourse crossings. And this is one of the reasons why. In order to build a road, typically you need equipment. Now, I just grabbed this off the internet, a picture of this excavator. Something like this will cost you upwards of $1,000 a day. Then you have to get the equipment there. And so unless you have a significant road to build, this can be quite expensive. But in the end, when you have a road through your woodlot, there's some amazing benefits. First of all, you have the ability to manage water. So when you're accessing your woodlot, if you've built a road properly, and like this one shows in the picture where the road is crowned, the water will go into the ditches. If you have proper watercourse crossings, then the water is dealt with appropriately and you're not going to have washouts and you're not going to have big environmental disasters. But the road is important so you can have contractors access your woodlot. You're going to protect the environment. Fire access in case you've got a really hot, dry summer, you can get in there for fire protection reasons. And the cost of managing a woodlot actually goes down over time if you have a well-built road and it's well maintained. Now, not everyone needs a road like this. This is a pretty decent sized road. Some people only need a small road, such as Christmas tree growers or maple syrup producers. They don't need as big of a road, so we can help you with that as well. But eventually, a road like this through a Christmas tree lot is gonna need some maintenance at some point in the future. At some point, this road is gonna need to be brushed, maybe some ditching, maybe there's a cross culvert up there that will need to be replaced at some point in the future, maybe even some gravel on it. So we do help lots of woodlots, even on small roads, not even the big ones, but the small ones, what we call a Class E road, can be very helpful as well. So here are some of the program basics that we have. So our program will help cover 75% of eligible road costs on your woodlot. Each landowner has a maximum reimbursement of $1,500 per year. Now, when you're talking about a road construction project that can be multiple thousands of dollars, this isn't going to pay for a whole lot of road. However, we can help you a little bit further, but it's help. We're not there to pay for the whole road, but we can help you build your road. Now, though that cost can include the use of your own equipment. So if you've got a small tractor, maybe you've got a small excavator, maybe you've got a mower on the side of your tractor for brushing, that can count towards cost. So if you have a reasonable hourly rate for your tractor and your bush mower, your bush hog, then that is eligible for reimbursement. Of course, all of the roads that we help fund are inspected. A fellow named Dennis, for those of you who haven't met him before, and the road needs to meet certain standards. We can't just be scratching a little ATV trail through the woods and expecting that to qualify. So there are certain standards that have to be met on the road, but they are all inspected. And I'll say this, after listening to Annamarie's presentation, you'll probably know that our biggest problems are watercourse crossings. So even though number 3 here says you can include the use of your own equipment, I highly recommend, if you're going to build a road, get someone that knows what they're doing. They're certified watercourse sizers or installers, and they know what they're doing, know what they're building. But it's not our play. If you want to try it on your own, you're welcome to do so, but just make sure you follow all the rules. Okay, so this is what you need to do to access the program. We've been doing this since 1967. It's called the Gas Tax Road Access Program. So it's meant a portion of taxes paid on fuel in the forest industry is then shuffled off and allocated to help woodlot owners build roads. So the way to access that is you join Forest Nova Scotia and sign the Principles of Forest Stewardship Agreement. So in your second year of membership, you can apply for the road access program before March 31st. So that'll involve a form, a map, and a small application fee. So upon approval, you can when your road is approved, you can make arrangements for the road work. You'll have 2 years to build your road, and you can submit your receipts upon approval. And then Dennis will be out to inspect the road. So a couple main things there. Let's say you wanted to build a road next year on your woodlot. You can join Forest Nova Scotia this year, become a member in 2021 before the end of the year. And then in 2022, let's say in January, February, you can renew your membership for the next year and apply for a road at the same time. If you need some more information, you can go to our website. It's pretty clear there. When you go to the website, go to forestnovascotia.ca under the road program, and it'll explain everything there about how to apply and some of the standards for the roads from there. I left out a whole bunch of things about, I'm hoping I'll get some questions, but if not, then I'll maybe answer them, even if I don't get questions. So that is the end of my presentation.
Great, thank you, Todd. While people are thinking of the questions, I'm just wondering, what has been the trend in terms of numbers of people applying over the last, I don't know, 10 to 20 years?
Well, we've got, we're close to 700 members, and we now have about 400 people applying for a road a year.
Okay.
So it's a good program, and it's, it's being taken advantage of, but there's also lots of other, there's more room for more people.
And you're getting a wide cross-section, I guess, of users, different land types, and once you explained your membership, and so it's a cross-section of those users, I assume?
It's a cross-section, but to be fair, most of the large companies don't really use the program that much. $1,500 a year is what they get. So most of the larger companies, they're spending way more than that. So most of the membership are small woodland owners. So there's a couple things to keep in mind about costs. By the time you join Forest Nova Scotia and pay the road application fee, and we're only paying 75% of the costs. So if you submit receipts for, say, $2,000, you'll get reimbursed $1,500. But with the application fees, you're going to net out about $1,000.
Okay. And this first question sort of related to that. If you had a road project that exceeded the annual amount under the program, can you continue to draw from the road fund until the cost of the project is covered?
Oh, that's a good question, Don. Actually, you can. So most roads are not going to be $2,000. Most roads are going to be multiple thousands of dollars. So if you you submit an application and you think your road's going to be $8,000, it comes into $10,000. Submit your invoices. And then what Dennis does, he goes out and inspects the road. If everything passes, he takes the first $2,000 and you get reimbursed $1,500. The following year, all you have to do is apply for that road again. You've done all the work, you've submitted your receipts, you'll get another $1,500 the next year until your invoices have been depleted. So you could do one road project and get $1,500 a year until your invoices are depleted.
That's a good deal. And I guess it all depends on supply and demand in terms of number of applicants and amount of money available each year as far as how many are successful.
Correct. So it's, in fact, this year, typically, well, we spend all our money every year. The budget every year gets depleted. Dennis has actually already inspected some roads that were applied for this year. And they're just waiting in the queue for when we get the budget next year that they'll be spent already. However, at some point, either the budget will have to go up or something will have to be done. But right now, there's still room.
Right. And it was interesting. You mentioned about the fact that you can provide assistance on a wide range of different types of roads or access trails almost. But I think it is important, like you mentioned, about reminding people that they still have to abide by the existing laws of the land in terms of watercourse protection.
Right. There's a couple big things there. If you're building a new road, it really needs to be to a Class D standard, unless you're accessing some Christmas trees or maple syrup. There's a little bit of leeway there. But if you're coming to a watercourse, you really need to pay attention to those regulations, because that's where you're going to spend your money. That's where there's going to be the most problems. That's where you need someone who really knows what they're doing to take care of that.
And again, for these new landowners that are listening here tonight that may have inherited or purchased a land that they've not done much with in the past, they may have inherited an old road that might be a fairly old in bad shape. But I guess this is a good opportunity for them to learn that, okay, this is the way that they can beef up that road and bring it up to standard, bring it up to a better quality, help protect the water quality and those types of things by doing the work that you're suggesting.
Yes, it is. In fact, if you've got an old road, the standards, you don't have to bring it up to a Class D standard. If you've got an old road and you're just applying to have some maintenance on it, let's say you want to brush out the road, cut back the alders. Well, you can do $2,000 worth of alder cutting, and that can be funded. Even though the road isn't brought up to Class D standard, we can at least help you with your brushing.
Good point. That actually answers the question that just came in from Carol. Does this program cover repairs to an old road?
Yes, it does. And in fact, most people use it for that. And let's say they'll say, okay, this year I'm going to brush. Next year, maybe they'll apply and they'll ditch it. They'll a kilometer of ditching. So that'll be their next application. Or maybe someone only just wants to put some gravel on the road. We help with those maintenance expenses as well. And it doesn't have to be brought up to Class D standard. Only if you're constructing a new road, it really should be built to a Class D standard to start.
One thing I've heard discussed from time to time is the quality of the gravel, or what type of gravel or crushed rock is required. Do you have any specific specs on that?
No, I don't. because there are some roads that may not need any gravel at all. In fact, the picture I had in my presentation had no gravel on it at all. It was just the material from on site.
Right.
But Department of Transportation, as Darcey may say, you need certain classes of gravel as you're entering onto a public highway. You know, a certain amount of distance from that intersection needs to be classed. I don't know what kind of class, but you know, crushed stone.
Right, right. We have a question here. What is your sense of how well woodlots are being roaded by landowners? And what do you find landowners generally have as objectives for access? Or is it highly variable?
I would say it's highly variable. What was the first question?
What is your sense of how well woodlots are being roaded and how much access is being provided into woodlots, I guess, by landowners?
Well, I would say, honestly, I don't think woodlots are being roaded very well at all. You know, we need better roads. And there's some contractors doing very good jobs, building some beautiful roads that are going to stand the test of time. They're going to need very little maintenance. Others, because really our program is not much money, to be honest. You know, $1,500 does not go very far when you're trying to maintain a road. So people try and get by doing very little. I would recommend to, you know, get someone who does a good job and can really completely rebuild your road, and it's going to stand the test. It'll stand the test of time and reduce your road access costs over the long term.
Now, we've come through a challenging forestry time, challenges, as you're well aware, and the industry, you know, has had some challenges, and there's also the aging workforce. And I'm just wondering what degree of those talented operators are out there to do this type of work.
Well, I think that the population has been reduced. There's been some contractors that have sold gear and moved on. The ones that have stayed are pretty good, and they've got lots of work. With people moving here from Ontario, I know lots of people who have excavators that are putting in sewage beds and building basements and things like that. So a lot of our good contractors are actually quite busy. But don't let that dissuade you. At some point, it's going to slow down, and we're going to need them.
And so for these woodlot owners that are new to the game, how do they find those people? Is there a listing that you have, or how do you suggest that they get a good person or an experienced person in this regard?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't have a list. We've been considering it. But someone could contact our office and we can, you know, get a range of people in their area and suggest some names of people we're familiar with, lots of contractors. But no, we don't have a list yet.
And like anything, when you're getting contractors, it's good to get references, right? I mean, that goes with any type of work.
References are good. And in general, Dennis, and we've just recently finished another road program that I didn't really talk about here, the enhanced road program that's finishing up. But so we've gotten to meet a lot of contractors, a lot of woodlot owners. So between Dennis, myself, and Jeremy, who was also an inspector with us, we've got a pretty good sense of who the good contractors are and maybe others that you would want to.
Great. Okay. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Todd?
No, I don't think so. I definitely visit our website if you've got questions about the program, because there's lots of information there. If the website isn't good enough for you, or you know you have more questions, don't hesitate to give me a call or send an email to me. I'd be happy to meet with you. I'm the outreach coordinator, so that's what I do. I go out and meet with people and try and help them solve their forestry woes.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that. I'll bet that you'll be getting some calls or emails tonight or tomorrow from some of the people that have heard this, maybe for the first time. So it's a good opportunity for them. So thanks very much for coming, Todd, in and speaking to us about this tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Don.
Okay, so there you have it, folks. Plenty of information for all of you participating today, and as well as those that will view this recording at a later time. Lots of things to think about, how it pertains to your situation either now or in the future. Todd, Darcey, and Annamarie, on behalf of our conference organizing committee and all those participating today, thanks very much for your time, effort, and useful information you provided. Because of the fact that we're only together virtually today, we're unable to personally present you with a thank you gift on behalf of all those that benefited from your experience and words. However, you will soon be receiving a container of a popular non-timber forest product and a favorite sweet treat, that is maple syrup from Rosebriar Farm of Carroll's Corner, thanks to our friend Pat O'Toole, and we will track you down with it at a date soon. So, that brings to an end today's session. Our next Woodland Conference mini-series webinar sessions will be in 2022, which isn't that far away from now, it's hard to believe. Our plan is to offer a session in both February and March, followed hopefully by our in-person regional full-day conferences in April. As I mentioned, the one in April 2nd will be in Millbrook outside Truro. The full conference webinar mini-series schedule can be found on the nswoods.ca website for your reference. Again, we'd like to thank our three presenters today for making this event meaningful for those of you that tuned in today and those that will in the future. I'd like to also put a plug in for Woya and Boston Tree. If you happen to know of a woodlot owner or yourself that has been trying to set a really good example for other landowners, the public, the environment, making use of your land for various things, sharing the use of the land, taking care of the environment, being productive and doing good forest management, any number of things that you're doing on your property. We are looking for nominations for the Woodland Owner of the Year Award. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to pay a visit. That's one of the very enjoyable things that we get to do in our job and working with landowners. And we had a great field day at Luther Sears Woodlot this year, and Moose River, Cumberland County, and we'd love to organize another field day next fall at one of your woodlots. The other thing is the Boston Tree. You've probably heard in the media recently that Boston Tree came from Cape Breton and was just shipped last week to Boston, and they love it, and it's a very popular program, and we'd love to find a Boston tree either on your woodlot or somewhere in your area. So please, if you think there's a potential tree there, we're looking at 40+ feet, ideally 45 feet tall, with 4 good sides and great density and shape and all of that, but we'd love to hear from you, and we'll check them out. Finally, if you could please provide your feedback in the exit survey, this will help us plan for future events. And to do this, before you close down your browser, just click on Leave Event to get to the exit survey, and it only takes 1 to 2 minutes to complete. And your information will be kept private and not used for any promotional or commercial purposes, we promise. If for some reason you're not able to complete the exit survey, you can also go to nswoods.ca website and just email the request there that we send you an exit survey, and we'll do that so you can get an opportunity to fill it out that way. Okay, well, that's it for now, everyone. We hope this was a worthwhile use of your time and you were able to learn lots from it. We look forward to our next session and hope to connect with you then. Thanks again, and take good care of each other. Bye for now.